an advocate in the realm of sexual health and pleasure. Dr. Kennedy earned a master's in clinical psychology and a PhD in clinical sexology. She is also a board-certified sex therapist. So she knows what she's talking about, which is great. With deep commitment to dismantling taboos and empowering individuals, she launched the Pleasure Project, a platform dedicated to exploring the nuanced intersections of science, desire, and emotional well-being. By blending rigorous research with empathetic storytelling, Dr. Kennedy inspires more inclusive, informed, and open conversations about sexual pleasure and intimacy. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's very kind of you. So, yeah, I've got a lot to ask you, so I guess I'll just get straight into it. So I wanted to go back a little bit and just understand a bit about your formative years and experience and what helped create the values that drives you today.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I think that I've always been a people person, I would say. I've always been a connector. I have gone through several careers, and people have always been sort of my go-to. I'm an extrovert, and I feel like I'm interested in people. I've wanted to help people in various ways. I'm curious about story and narrative and what makes people tick. And this coming together of skills and interest, and it's amazing to me that I can make a career of this. So it's a cool coming, kind of like meshing together. In this work that I get to do, and I'm so lucky that people trust me with pretty vulnerable, tender information, in this work. So yeah, I feel lucky.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, trust, isn't it? It's because people are, I guess you don't know what to expect when you first reach out to you and people like you. I think, gosh, because you've had a big commitment to reach out in the first place, and then you're handing over a big part of yourself.
I never know what's walking in the door.
No, exactly.
They call and I mean, there is some pattern, and that's what I've started to see over the years of what's coming in, but everyone's history is different, and what the struggles that people have are unique, and there's a little bit of nuance to it. But generally, I would say the core theme that I see is that people don't feel like they're enough. People don't feel good enough, and whatever the blank, I don't feel smart enough or thin enough or educated enough or rich enough or sexy enough or whatever it is. And so it's this enough, and sitting with that and trying to sort of help them unpack that and unravel that. And it's an interesting journey.
Absolutely. And do you think that's down to the sort of comparison culture we have these days? I mean, if you look at somebody's life on Instagram, it's perfect. They're beautiful, they're with a beautiful partner, they're in an incredible environment, they're doing all these things. And is that, I guess, if we had nothing to compare ourselves to, we wouldn't perhaps think we were less than we should be. So do you think increasingly with social media and the challenges that brings about, that's driving it?
Yeah, I think if you look at cultures where people have less, and if they are more consumed with the everyday of just getting by and trying to, third world countries or countries that are less privileged in general, they actually tend to be a little more satisfied. They're more family focused, they're more purpose focused. It's interesting in that our culture, we tend to have more opportunity and more privilege and less satisfaction, and a little more self-judgment tends to occur, which is kind of counterintuitive, but yeah, it's like there's a little more time for self-reflection and comparison and dissatisfaction as a result. So yeah, unfortunately.
It's hard, isn't it, when you keep wanting more, and I guess it's very, very hard to decide that something's enough. I was listening to another podcast a few weeks ago, and there was a guy talking about some friends of his that are all sort of multimillionaires, so wealthy in the general scheme of things. And he was saying that they were complaining to him. They went out with some friends that happened to be billionaires, and they felt they felt so mean. I know, they felt exactly this. They felt so poor and insecure. So I couldn't go and afford to buy an island. Okay, it was just yeah, well, I can't. I've got to have more. I need to have. If I've got 100 million, I need 200 million. No, I need a billion. And a billion is not enough. It's yeah, it's
I've
funny
seen
whenever we
research
benchmark
that
ourselves.
says you'd rather be with people who have less and feel like you have the most of the room rather than have less and feel like, you
Yeah,
know, yeah, it's a weird thing to have, perceptually you want to have relatively more with the company you keep
yeah.
rather than overall more, but feel like you have less than everyone you're around. Yeah, perceptually, it's a very strange dynamic.
So how do you? I mean, so when I come into you and I say, look, I just don't feel I'm enough. I'm not handsome. I'm not wealthy. I'm not. None of these things are true, obviously. But I'm not handsome. I'm not wealthy. I'm not fit. I'm not sort of beach body ready. You obviously can't just turn around and say, no, you are. Don't worry about that. How do you start to peel away why I think that and what reality really is when you talk to somebody?
Yeah, it's not just a challenge. You can't just challenge that belief, right? Because it's not just objectively true or not true. It's where did that come from, and what is your attachment to that, and
Mhm.
why are you placing value there, and how are you reinforcing it? So for example, are you watching what are you looking at on social media?
Yeah.
And that's likely reinforcing it. Who are you keeping company with? What messages are you telling yourself? And why do what are your values that also reinforce that? Because it's making you feel really bad and it's
Yeah.
sending messages of reinforcement. So yeah, it's interesting. And I find that too, sexuality, which is mostly the zone I'm living in,
Mhm.
is connected. It's sort of a microcosm of the larger picture. And so if you're dissatisfied in your bigger life, you're probably also not feeling a lot of desire because if you don't feel worth, you're likely also not feeling a lot of that in your sexual side either. If you don't feel confidence, if you don't feel worth over here, you're not going to likely feel a whole lot of it in your sexual zone. And so having that ability to claim yourself and to feel, you know, yes, there's the physical side of it, but there's also so much of it is emotional and mental and psychological for yourself, right? There's
Yeah.
also the medical side, medical, biological.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, some of that's happening in terms of blood flow and, physiological, but assuming that's all in check, then it's about what's actually happening for you psychologically. Do
Mm.
you feel deserving? Do you feel, um, yeah, it's deserving. It's kind of like the word it boils down to a lot. And do you allow yourself good things? Do you feel connected to another person? Do you feel connected to yourself first, but then do you feel connected and deserving
Mm.
to have this pleasurable experience? Because for the most part, sex is about pleasure, and that's where people get kind of squirrely. You know, if they don't feel in love with themselves, if they don't feel deserving, they're not actually going to seek pleasure unless it's in a, hedonistic sort of grab it and go away. And so that slower, more sensual experience is a very different pursuit.
Mm.
So it is an undercurrent of like, what is your larger philosophy on pleasure and self? And that's a more existential conversation that we have, you know? Yeah. We got heavy fast.
No, I like that, and I do want to ask you about two articles that I read. One was about sexless marriage, and one was about empty nesting. But I'll come on to those in a second because both of them relate back to something you just said actually. But I just wanted to actually say to people, I'll put a link into the show notes for the Pleasure Project, and I encourage everybody to go and have a look at it once they've finished listening to this, obviously. And I just wonder if you could tell people a little bit what to expect when they click on the link, and in particular, if you touch on the Pleasure Circle, because I thought it was really interesting.
Sure. So Pleasure Circle is a small group intensive that I've created, and that was born out of the sex therapy that I've been doing for years with mostly with couples, but also with
Mhm.
individuals. And I found that over and over again, people came in with the same problem. And I thought, okay, how do I help more people? And how do I make it more accessible to people who don't live in my hometown? And so this is a group that I run a few times a year that right now is for women. And it's usually women who are experiencing some kind of lower desire. They want sex, or they feel some hesitation around sex, and maybe they've never had good sex, or they just kind of feel a lot of ambivalence about it. They
Yeah.
sort of don't want it, or they feel a lot of confusion around it. And these women typically are a little bit older, so I would say maybe typically 40 to 65
Mhm.
are typically the demographic that are in that group. And so it's a 6-week program, and it's based on research that I did for my dissertation around women and sexuality. And so each week there's a lecture that I give that it gives really valuable information. And then I give writing prompts. So they're going to apply the information to themselves, because I think it's really helpful to hear information. But then
Mm.
when you start to think about, well, how does this information apply to me? It really reinforces it differently. And then we have a group discussion about it, because that also helps apply, because you're hearing other people talk about it. And then you're also thinking, okay, how does this line up with my own experience? And I feel like the learning is exponential, because you're having your own experience, and then you're hearing others, and it
Yeah.
opens it up, and you're hearing some of your experience echoed in others. And so this has been magic. I've run it about 8 times over the last 2 years, and it's been wonderful. I'm working on an asynchronous version of it, so
Mhm.
people who are shy about groups can do it on their own pacing. And I'm also working on a workbook,
Mm.
but the live version is gold. So that's the pleasure circle. And I just really think it's been really great. Most women coming into it feel some trepidation, because they're like, I don't know these strangers. I don't want to share my personal life. But by the end, they're all like, can we have each other's phone numbers? And
Oh,
I've also
good.
run this curriculum with couples.
Mhm.
I've done it with just a couple, like 2 people alone.
Mm.
My vision originally was to run it with several couples, but I have to tell you, the men get really funny about it. They don't want to share
Yeah.
about their sexual dysfunction in front of other men. And so I haven't been able to get past that hurdle to do it in that configuration, but I am trying to hopefully have that happen in the future. I would love to
Mm.
have that happen, because I do think everybody benefits from the group dynamic.
They do, and it's not the sort of thing well, certainly not the sort of thing that, in my experience, men chat to other men about, just their friends. I think having that safe
Yeah.
space where you're not broadcasting this live on the internet for anybody to stream. It's something that's just between those people. And I think particularly for the women, I think the huge value in the 40 to 65 age group is the fact that all of those women are going to go through the menopause, and we hear a lot about the menopause, increasingly so, which is
Yeah.
great. This is a great thing, but we don't tend to hear very much about sex in the menopause. Because
Yeah.
when I've talked to people that have had the menopause, been through the menopause, going through the menopause, a lot of them will say, "Look, the last thing I'm thinking about is how to be sexy. I'm trying not to
Yeah.
get hot flushes. I'm trying to remember things. I'm trying to remember all this stuff." So I think
Yeah.
you almost want to have that. There's a, and that's why I want to come on to the sexless marriage thing. That there's a big difference. Well, first of all, sexless marriage sounds terrible, but it's not.
I know.
It's
I know. I
not.
was
When you
like,
read your
my
article, it's not. Because I think what you do very cleverly is there's a big difference between
Yeah.
intimacy and sex. People think about sex as being penetrative sex. That's what they think
Yep.
about generally.
Yep.
What is sex? That's what 99% of people would tell you. Whereas your words are around spending time together, doing things together, holding hands, talking, being present with
Yeah.
one another. They're all such intimate things, because often the actual physical act of sex doesn't necessarily always feel that intimate. If that makes, that's why people go and pay people, for
Yes,
goodness sake.
right? That's
But
so
actually, the
true.
mental piece
Okay,
is really
so
different.
well, just to back up too, I sent. Okay, so you're referencing my newsletter, which goes
Yeah.
out every week, and I
Okay.
2 weeks ago I sent out one, and the headline was "A Sexless Marriage," and I thought, oh, am I going to turn people off? Because most
Delete,
of the time,
delete, delete.
I know I was like, my audience is really on it because I'm a sex therapist, and I thought, am I going to freak people out? Am I going to get unsubscribes? And I sort of hesitated before I sent it out. I have to tell you that had the highest open rate of any of my newsletters
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's such good information, right? It had an 80% open rate. And I was like, okay, I'm onto something here.
Definitely.
And big part of that was the delineation between a sexless marriage, which by the way is defined as less than 12 times a year. So that would still be once a month. That's not no
Yeah.
sex. And sex being defined as penetrative sex, but also delineating between intimacy, right? It's intimacy and sex being penetrative sex. There's lots of sex that can be defined otherwise, and lots of couples still have intimacy without sex. So I like to really encourage my couples to say, like, what do you want? And there's lots of versions of this, and many people are married and really enjoy companionship, really enjoy intimacy, especially in these longer term relationships, where for many reasons, be it, because of pain or because of, physical limitations, or on the part of the, in the heterosexual coupling, men or women, penetrative sex isn't really possible or comfortable. So what else is out there, right? So the message that, hey, it's still okay, there's lots of other options, right? So I'm really like hitting that message home a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's not the end of things if you can't be having penetrative sex on a regular basis. Yeah, that there's still life after that.
No, I thought it was, yeah, and I recommend people sort of to get the article when they go to the website. So it was really interesting, and something as you sort of said is that we shouldn't chastise ourselves for not having the sex we had when we were 25. First of all, I think I'd be exhausted. Secondly, I'm
Yeah.
not. I can't. I'm
Yeah.
not able to be that person. We do change and evolve, and I think how much more intimate can you get than kissing somebody? And it's on this sort of intimacy scale. You wouldn't necessarily put full penetrative sex right at the top. It's there's different, and I think that's what I think people, when they open that newsletter, were looking for, is almost validation that intimacy within a relationship and all the different shades of intimacy is as important, if not more important, than actually, right, so how many times have we had sex this week? It's not about that. It's about that connection that makes, so I can completely understand why people.
And also changing the conversation to say, rather than how many times, it's like not just because we ask women, do you want sex? And it's like, actually, do you want the sex you're having? Right?
Different things, aren't they?
It's a different question,
They
because a
are,
lot
really
of
are,
times, it's not just do you want sex, it's like, do you want this sex? And so I find that it's a nuanced question, and a lot of the women that are coming in that are in that 50 plus age range it's different for women under 40 because they've been raised very differently. They advocate differently. They've grown up with toys, that type of thing. But women that are over 50 at this point, they're empty nesting, that kind of thing. But they've been in marriages where, they a lot of times were just sort of doing what their male partner wanted, and they didn't advocate for their own pleasure. And so they haven't necessarily had very good sex. And so they're not that motivated. And especially as menopause starts to happen and they're having some physical discomfort, they're just like, forget it, I'll just scrap the whole thing. And so I'm like, wait, let's actually help you advocate for what you want. So let's help you figure out what you want. And then let's have you communicate that to your partner so that it can be a positive experience for you both. Let's not have you like eject out of the relationship or refuse to have sex. Let's have you get what you want, which is a very different conversation. And usually the partner is open to, they're receptive to direction. They just haven't ever received direction.
Yeah. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of it comes down to certainly my generation. We were never. It was sort of frowned upon to explore our own bodies sexually. So masturbation was always something that was very rushed and very hurried in case, oh my God, and mum might open the bedroom door, or dad might suddenly burst in, or whatever. So we never had time to actually explore what our own bodies were capable of and what we felt as being pleasant and nice, good, etc. So I think then when you bring two people into a relationship that neither of them really understand their own pleasure, sensitivity, sensations, and then the two of you are going to try and make it work together, you can understand really why it's quite difficult because neither of you got a clue what you're doing really. And whereas I think nowadays, I think people are, like I said, there's a lot more information out there. A lot more people are very comfortable with different elements of sexuality. Whereas, for people of my generation and older, it's a very, very different situation. And then that brought me on to what I wanted to ask you. You mentioned it already about empty nesting. So I feel like this is a therapy session for me. Sorry. So I got my daughter turned 18 last week, which is first of all, how on earth did that happen? I can literally remember bringing her out from hospital. So she's heading off to university in September, hopefully, to study philosophy and ethics, which is fabulous. My son's 15 and he's out all the time playing football and doing exciting things, and he's got his first girlfriend, so that's changed everything. So suddenly, we went too many years when my wife and I look at each other and think, oh gosh.
You're going to re-meet each other now.
We are. You talked about empty nesting, and I love the marriage 2.0, and I wonder what do you say to people when they come to you? Not me, obviously. When people come to you and say, "Look, my children left home. I'm suddenly spending all my time with my partner, who I obviously still love massively, but we've never not had that distraction of driving everywhere, even as our own again, and days are our own again." How do you suddenly?
It's really an interesting time because you're so oriented towards the kids for years, for 20 years. That takes over your life.
Yep.
And that's your priority, and it really desexualizes you because it dampens that whole aspect. You don't get to walk around the house naked. Not that you ever did, but you know what I mean? Like, there's just a difference in the vibration when kids are around. And once they leave the house and you realize you get to look over and just see your partner, and it's like, it's really an opportunity to reset, and not even reset back to what you were, but reset what you envision now, who you are, because you've evolved in who you are, what you like, maybe what you can now reimagine what you want and how you want to approach, how you want to engage. And I think it's exciting. And I think it's an opportunity. And so, like I said, a lot of times at this point, dissatisfaction will rise up and it gets voiced, and it's almost like recontracting sort of who are we, what do we want? And I just think it's also a huge opportunity to come back together and sexually explore yourself, slow it down, explore one another and communicate. It's like kind of get brave and start to make things more explicit. And also what I like about older folks, and I'm saying older being 50 plus, I work a lot with people who are like 50 to 75, and there's just like a acceptance. We trade, what do we say, beauty for wisdom. And it's like there's just this like acceptance of like, we don't have all the tightness and everything going on, but there's a certain amount of like, we're not going to be so attached to that, but everything's working well enough, and let's figure this out together, and let's have enjoyment, and it doesn't have to go on all night long, but let's have a good time and give each other some grace along the way. It's like the journey is the goal, not the destination.
It's funny, isn't it? You've had 20 years with the kids in the bedroom next door, and you are limited to the bedroom, and you can't have naked Saturday or whatever. And suddenly it's like, oh gosh, Yeah, I think that's probably the time where you must find people need a little bit of help in how to suddenly start communicating again, because you probably haven't communicated in that way, not through any intentionality, just like you say, you've been so focused on another part of the family that suddenly communicating actually becomes even more important, I think.
Yeah. Communicating, starting to flirt again, starting to like see yourself as a sexual being, starting to, look over and engage with your partner in that way. It's like I feel like couples sometimes become like business partners in the business of life.
Yes.
It's like, did you take the trash out? Did you pay the
Yeah.
property taxes? That kind of stuff. But, looking at her with, desire and thinking about what would make her feel special and, joyful and, how would it feel to turn her on? Like that's a different like thread that you have to somehow, kind of resurrect or reach for and be intentional about. And that's different.
It's quite exciting, isn't it? So it's suddenly
It is.
it's suddenly you're not having to check the calendar to make sure the kids aren't on a sleepover, or they're not being picked up from a party or whatever, or if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. So it's suddenly you think, well,
Right.
we don't need this weekend, we don't need the calendar. It's
Yeah.
we can stay in bed till 11 in the morning and do whatever, or we can.
Or you could create a new calendar that the kids don't see and just put in sex.
Yeah, that'd be quite good. What do you find that some of the there's so many of them, some of the most common misconceptions are about sexual pleasure? Is it that so I'm going to give you the answer as well now. Is it that maybe this is a different question. Do you think people feel sometimes uncomfortable or even a sense of shame about what they view as pleasurable sexually?
Okay, well, I'm going to answer the first question first.
Okay.
I'd say the biggest misconception is that women can orgasm through penetration. Most women can't. Most women don't. I'd say about 20, 25% of women maybe might be able to, but most women don't. And then that sort of relates to, there's people feel self-conscious oftentimes about how they get turned on, and it's such a range. And some of that's informed by what they're reading or what they're watching or what they've gathered along the way, right? Fantasies are funny that way. There's little fixations or kinks that people pick up. But any of that's influenced at any point based on new information and what's available and not available and what's taboo and not. So it's interesting. I encourage people to, I do this whole exercise that is sort of cultivating stimulators, as I like to call them, and looking at sort of what, and not just like your immediate exact turn-ons, right? But like a broader conversation about that, more of a priming for pleasure in you as an individual sensory, like a larger sensory conversation of, some people are more sensitive to it. They like scent, they like touch, they like taste. There's those people that are just foodies and they like everything and they like design and all. I'm one of those people. I'm like, and they can turn themselves on easily, typically, those kind of folks. But knowing that some of those things are in place means you're probably more in a primed, receptive place for interaction, for pleasure seeking. So that's good information. And that's helpful if you know that stuff is happening, to be more receptive to a partner. But what I will say also is it's really important for you to know what your deterrents are, because if those aren't addressed first, then your stimulators actually aren't going to be very accessible, because you need to quiet and address and, kind of arrest those deterrents, or you're not going to really have access to the stimulators. That's just the way it is. Because they're going to keep kind of gnawing at you. And so, and these are all unique. The same thing might not bug you that bugs me, right? So you have to kind of know what those are, identify those, and be an adult and address them. And sometimes you need to tell your partner, and sometimes you just need to deal with it yourself. But get those, and maybe it's lock the door, right? If your kids are in the bedroom next door, then lock the damn door. But whatever it is, figure it out, and then start to cultivate, address the deterrents, and then cultivate the stimulators.
Yeah. It's funny. I got a lot of knowledge when I used to work Sex in the City with my partner, and it's funny in there were so many things that were like almost the icks or the turn offs and things, or the what turns people on. Each character sort of different, and each person's dating relationships were different as well. But yeah, and I found that, I mean, obviously people get so much now from the internet, but watching their sort of program, and I remember, do you remember an episode where I think it's probably Samantha was having sex with a guy, and she slipped her finger up his bum, and the day that afterwards, she said, "Shall I do that again?" What? No, I would never like that, and completely disavowed enjoying it whatsoever in the moment. Once it happened, I was like, no, that isn't me. But in the moment, it was that confusion about, well, but you loved it. It was at the time, but then suddenly afterwards, you say, no, that isn't me at all. So people being true to themselves, I guess, and being honest about.
Well, and that's an example of, in the moment when it's the somatic response, and it's like you're in the zone, and you don't have to give like eye contact and verbal permission, right? That there's just this like nonverbal sort of yes, no, oh, it happened, oh wow, and there was a response.
Yes.
Right, versus check yes or no to this. Well, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, right, because I'm not going to opt into that, because that would mean, and men are so funny about any sort of anal play, right? They equate it with like homosexuality, which it's not. It's just full of nerve endings. It feels great. Let it be.
The prostate is one of the most
part of the options.
Absolutely, that sort of prostate manipulation and orgasm and prostate play is such a very different experience. But people, like I say, anywhere near that, that's got to be, oh god.
But I think that happens in a million ways. Is like nipple play too, like, right? Men with breast play are like, ooh, but it's all just like the body is just a wonderland. It's all open for play. And so if people can just own their erogenous zones and what they like, and whatever, it's all fine. If they can just own that. It can be really fun. And I find that partners influence one another, right? The confidence in owning what you like has a really good effect on your partner. I think if you can say, I really love this and it turns me on, that gives permission to your partner to be like, oh, good. Okay, good. I get to do this thing, right? But if you're like rigid and shameful and like awkward about it, then it like creates this moment where you can't move forward with it, because then it introduces shame in the room, and then you can't go forward with joy.
And do you think that the sort of confused feelings come from historical sort of religious things or cultural things, or just the sort of when we're growing up, if you keep doing that, you'll go blind, or stop, put your hand out of there, sort of thing? This
all of the above.
It's bad, isn't it?
I don't think. I mean,
it is pleasure, isn't it? It's pleasurable.
Kids don't think any of this stuff. We learn. It's all learned. Because otherwise you just do things, and you try things, and you poke things, and you feel good, and you're like, kids play with themselves. They're just like, and then along the way it's like, don't touch that. That's gross. That's dirty. That's not what boys do. That's not what girls do. And you're like, oh, you learn it all. You learn all of that behavior is right or wrong. Yeah, because inherently we're just curious, and we're sensory beings. None of it's wrong.
It's in a similar way, I guess, to if you grow up in a certain household and the household has very, very bland food, or everything's processed, whatever. We never get to experience what, I don't know, olives or anchovies or avocados or pomegranates taste like. And you want to explore those things, but it's because, like I say, everything is and I think food's a really good analogy of sex, really. It is a very sensual experience. I guess that's why on many dates we go out for dinner. we go to restaurants, we go and, I guess, try and have those taste sensations, and that's very much what.
But you can experience your own body. Like
Yeah.
many kids masturbate and they have a really positive experience, and as long as they don't get caught and shamed,
Yes.
they're like having a great time, you
Yeah.
know. But expanding the repertoire with toys or with products or with partners or with, yeah, that's when your world opens up to have other, wider experiences. Yeah. But in terms of introducing the shame or the what, this is what we do in our family or this is what we don't do in our culture. Yeah. So that's a construct. It's not an actual true rule,
No, and you hope as people get into relationships that they sort of start to develop their own thoughts and beliefs and hopes and all sort of things. Well, one thing I did want to ask you about, and you sort of touched on a little bit there about young people, etc. So one of the wonders of the current age is the ability we have to connect with anybody in the world, to access any sort of information, etc., online. One of the challenges is, I think the research shows that the average age that boys in particular access porn is 12 or 13 now. So when I was 12 or 13, porn was a centerfold torn out of a Playboy, passed on the playground. And my God, it's a picture of a naked woman. Oh my God. It was so exciting. That isn't what porn is today. So porn now, you can go online, and I think Pornhub gets 3 billion hits a month. And not all of those can be somebody clicking on it by mistake. People are looking at porn, and they look at porn before they've had a chance to understand what intimacy in a relationship is all about. And I wonder, when you talk to adults, to parents, etc., how do we go about helping our youngsters? And just was one more thing to say, sorry. And I talked to a content creator of porn last week, and she was fabulous, and she was saying that porn is great for ideas when in relationships, for thinking about things, looking at things, trying things online when you know things, but porn really shouldn't be used for sex education. It's not something that's going to educate you as such. Yeah, so I just wondered. Yeah, there's a lot of points there.
Porn is a tricky one because it does skew your perceptions of normalcy, and it does it to adults too, right? It's a setup. It habituates the body, it habituates the mind to thinking things are easier than they are, that there's a receptivity in partners that doesn't really exist in actual partnered sex, right? So there's this expectation. It also oftentimes habituates the body to quick orgasm that isn't possible in partnered sex. I mean, I've definitely seen porn addiction where, there's, and I'm not saying porn is terrible and you shouldn't do it, but I'm saying that it can be problematic, and it can be habitual, and it can kind of take over your life if you do it too much.
Yeah.
So, it's like everything in moderation. And I think a lot of people don't use it in moderation. So it's got to be, and I think teens don't have a fully formed brain, and they don't necessarily know the difference. And of course it's fascinating. I remember looking at those nudie magazines too and being like, wow, it was so exciting. And also I had nothing to compare it to. I didn't know what was out there. I didn't know what sex was like. And so ideally they aren't looking at that, and that isn't their first exposure, and that isn't what they're thinking. Because I do know that it's pushing these younger girls towards more anal sex, unfortunately. Like they're having more advanced sex sooner. And that's tricky because they're not necessarily emotionally prepared to negotiate their needs. And sometimes they're having sex that they're not comfortable with, and that's not giving them a pleasurable experience. And that's what I care about. I want everyone to feel like they're having consensual safe, pleasurable sex.
Yeah.
So yeah, so anywhere along the way, I want that to be true, and sometimes that's not happening. So I feel mixed about porn.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It doesn't generally talk about consent, which is super important, obviously. And it's and if you
It's
watch porn,
fantasy.
yeah, and
Sex is
your
fantasy.
expectation would be that nobody has any hair anywhere apart from on their head. Which is, I'm sure that's not true.
Yeah.
And like say every woman is happy being with more than one person and going straight from vaginal to anal sex without any preparation whatsoever. It just slips in, it's all fine. And that isn't the way it is. And a friend of mine, she's my age, she tends to date much younger. She's saying a lot of younger guys just assume that she wants to be choked or spanked or hairpulled. Hey, what the hell's going on? It's which all those things are fine if it's consensually done. It's not something that you should just spring on somebody. And we're not going to stop porn. Porn is an incredible technology driver.
Well, just like prostitution, right? Prostitution is like the oldest profession.
Exactly.
Because there's that desire, but it's like this awareness that is theater and this is reality, and understanding that the two are not the same, and there needs to be, this is an actual human that has feelings and needs, and that there's a delineation.
And that's why I think it is so important that parents or carers get over any embarrassment they might feel and just talk about it. And I had the conversation with my son when he was quite young about, look, just you're going to see porn you probably already have, and here's what the reality is, and here's what things are all about, and here's what consent is, and you've got to go past, you need to wear a condom. You've got to get past that and actually have a proper conversation. And I think youngsters now are more comfortable having a conversation, I think, because they've just got so much more knowledge anyway already. And they're probably far more advanced than their parents are. But I do think, having that conversation about intimacy and relationships is super important.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
What guidance would you have for people that feel uncomfortable in their sexual identity or the pleasure that they seek? How do you get people to sort of, you said it before really, about own their own pleasure and not be uncomfortable feeling that they are different from somebody else?
Yeah, and by sexual identity, do you mean like queer identity, or you just mean
No,
broad?
so LGBTQI plus. Yes, if somebody's even now, a lot of people are are nervous or hesitant to come out or talk about or whatever. So I do feel for people that have to sort of hide who they are really. That must be a really hard thing to do.
I think, well, gosh, and as we're unfortunately, the US is taking a turn for the worse in that department. I would say, media like movies and TV would be a nice place to start. If you were to Google movies or TV that include LGBTQ, that would be a great place, right? There's fun, sweet examples that give positive representation to those characters. Start there, because I think that makes a difference when you can see some sort of positive role models in those films. If you're in a smaller town and you don't have access to people like you, there are usually support groups, but it depends. I guess if you're in the middle of nowhere, maybe not. I know we have them here in California. And so that's a nice way to plug in and just get peer support, meet other people, because it normalizes that, like, your thoughts, your feelings, your desires, it's nice having friends even that just, or people that are in your world that just accept you, that it's like, it's not a second thought, right? So having allies, having, affirming people in your life, great. Having queer friends, even better. Having people to date, the best, because it is normal. It's a totally normal thing, and having that reflected in your world is ideal. Because I think that's what feels so hard, is like I'm different and therefore I'm unacceptable. You know, I'm married to a woman too, by the way, just for the record, I'll come out. So I grew up, queer, and I understand that, and I don't always come out, but like I feel like it is important more and more to be visible, because that is a tricky thing, and I think yeah, it's important to have some representation and visibility. Yeah.
No, definitely, and I think people look to others, really. They can see somebody like themselves that is proportioned to feel how they feel. It's super important. I mean, we still, and it's not any individual's responsibility, but we certainly still see in sport in particular. So I think in the UK, the Premier League's a big thing, sort of soccer. It's a massive thing over here, billion-dollar industry. I don't think any professional footballer in the top league has come out and said that they are gay. In the women's game, it's very, very different. It's very different.
It's definitely happening more and more, but yeah, I know that there's still a lot of hedging because there's money to be made, and there's there's a lot on the line, and
losing sponsorship.
you're starting to see it more with professional sports, but
yeah,
men, it's because the patriarchy still sort of pushes back, and it's tricky. But yeah, the temperature is changing for the worse, unfortunately, with the new administration. So it's getting, I don't know, it's a curious time.
It feels from the outside that that you have the US and you have California, two different countries, because it's. And I have a lot of friends that are part of the queer community, thankfully, and wonderful people. And I talk to them in America, and a lot of them are really nervous and scared about what some of the things are bringing in, and not only that, about how people are choosing to interpret them. So people that are perhaps they might define themselves as anti-woke or anti-DEI, whatever. They're suddenly interpreting it as something very, very different than what's been meant, and that is kind of scary. You just got to hope that politics changes quite quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's interesting too, though, because I will say that, back to kind of the pleasure conversation, is that queer pleasure has always been sort of at the forefront of this of sexuality. I mean, gay and lesbian has always been a fringe piece, and gay, more than anything, has always challenged. I mean, lesbian pleasure has been sort of fetishized and somehow accepted because it's women.
Yeah.
Gay pleasure has been sort of marginalized and pushed aside, but it's always been, it's sort of like how gays always gentrify the neighborhoods. It's like queer pleasure has also kind of been at the forefront, that there's this fascination, but there's this also like a rejection, but also a curiosity.
Yeah.
And you see that in porn, you see it in general, you see it in media and in music and in culture. I don't know. So it's not going anywhere. There's always going to be gays, and I applaud gay pleasure, and the more, many celebrities are coming out, and that's because it's always been here and it always will be, so
it must be how on earth do I know? But I would think, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we're just randomly, we're talking about the most viewed categories of porn, and I think the top two are MILF porn and girl on girl porn, most of which has been watched by straight men. And I don't know whether
I would also add trans women, trans female porn.
Yeah.
So I definitely, in my practice as a sex therapist, I get straight cis men coming in saying, I'm watching trans women, or they come in saying that they're attracted to trans women, and I'm like, well, how much porn are you watching of that genre? Because I know it's a thing, and then suddenly they're like, oh, am I pansexual? Or they don't have that word, but that's what it is. And it's like, yeah, if you watch a ton of porn in that category, it's going to start to pull your erotic template in that direction. But there is a fascination with trans women, And yet there's also this rejection of trans women, but there's this sort of, I don't know, it's a curious thing. We're evolving. What I say is just honor your own pleasure, and whatever you're drawn to is fine. Everybody gets to have what they like, and I encourage that.
Just one last question, and I don't mean this in a sexual sense, but what brings you joy and pleasure generally in your life?
Well, I kind of where we started, I'll go back to that, is I am so social.
People person.
So friends, I love connecting with people, and I have a group practice. So I have 10 clinicians that work with me, work for me. And I love mentoring and working with other people. I love speaking and connecting and collaborating with other professionals. And yeah, I like being part of a bigger dialogue, and I think that's fun.
It is, like I said, we're all, well, hopefully we're all curious and want to learn more, really. And so I know I said that was the last question, but that was a lie. I just had one more I do want to ask you. And I do always, it does always concern me when I talk to people that are in your line of work, people that are caring profession, people that are empathetic in general. How do you protect your own mental well-being? Because I'm sure some people come to you and they have very traumatic stories and very traumatic experiences, and they share them with you, and you've created a safe space for them, and they've given you their story, and you're in a position of trust. How do you go away and not think about
how do you balance that? It is an art to do that. In the beginning, I think it was really weighing on me, and I'd think about the stories at night, and I would sort of obsess and work on the cases and how am I going to help this person. And now I don't know, I'm very present when I'm in session. That's the best tool I can give, is be really present, be really like tuned in, and then let it go, because I have to let it go, because I have to move on to the next one.
Yes.
And then I counterbalance it with my outside time. I'm about to go skiing for 10 days. I'm leaving this weekend to go skiing, and that is my most fun activity ever. I love it. And take time off, see my friends, do my fun things, go for hikes, go for walks, go for yoga, do my other things, because I know that I have to click in. My work is really intense, and the only way I can do it well is to be really present, work hard, and then go play hard. And that's just sort of that compartmentalization that I do pretty well.
Yeah. It's super important. I mean, I think that whole thing about being present is so, and we hear a lot more about it these days, but particularly for you and what you do, it's because you can't go into the next session having, residue from the last 200 sessions in your mind, can you? So if you can sort of write next session,
I literally get up, I kind of just move around, shake it off, get a glass of water, and then sit down and go into the next one. You have to like literally. It's an art of like
that's just showing them utmost respect to the people in front of you. It's like you say, they've come to you, they're trusting you, they want your undivided attention, which they probably haven't had from other people. So that's super powerful. Well, make sure you're present when you're skiing. Don't be thinking about something else when you're jetting down a slope.
Oh yeah, you have to, right? It's got to be right here, right now.
My son went skiing for the first time last year and came back sort of obsessed with it, demanding we all go skiing and we all do this or whatever. And just I think certainly at that age, there was, from not being able to stand up on skis at the beginning of the week to going down a black run at the end of the week, it's like, what? I think I carry too much residual fear now, and I don't bounce it. But yeah, he loved it. We'll have a fabulous time. And thank you so much for finding time to talk. It was really enjoyable. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, I encourage anybody who enjoyed this conversation, please, sign up for my newsletter so you get all the, the future things that I'm writing and notifications of like when I'm speaking, and join the pleasure circle if they're really interested in working on their own sexual pleasure. Yeah.
I think we all should do. I really enjoyed the 2 articles I read, and I'll be definitely looking out for more. Thank you so much.
Okay.